Hello there, lovely people. It's Alex from Nintendo Life here, and I'm not alone. I'm joined by the venerable Mr. Felix.
Hey, paisanos, it's Mr. Felix.
We're doing all sorts of stupid voices before recording this video. So last night was the Summer Game Fest. We're not going to go through it like we do with a Direct, because unsurprisingly, it's not exclusively Switch, it's all kind of things, but Felix, you and I, we're men of the world. We like all sorts of different consoles and all sorts of different games, don't we?
Yes.
Right, that's going in the final cut.
Cool.
So, I wasn't originally going to watch this, just because I can catch up on everything as I have done in the past, just by looking on Nintendo Life and our sister sites Push Square and Pure Xbox. But speaking of Pure Xbox, one of my colleagues asked whether I could fill in and do the live blogging over on Pure Xbox, and I was like, yeah, okay, why not, do a favor. And I've done live blogging on Directs before. I thought, easy peasy. So I sat down and watched the whole thing and live blogged it. And Felix, you sat down as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I was actually like, yeah, I'm going to watch this. Maybe there's anything interesting. And I literally fell asleep because it was just such a snore fest. I'm sorry, but I fell asleep like 10 minutes in, I think. And then I woke up to The Last of Us, which was leaked. So, yeah. I mean,
there were some really good games featured, but I think it's very telling because Jeff Keighley, before, I think the day before or the day of, came out on Twitter and said, guys, manage your expectations for this, and that's not a good sign. I mean, props to him for doing that rather than needlessly hyping it up
fine.
As he did in the entire rest of it, saying that everything was the best thing ever. But I get it, it's his job to make things, to sell things like that. I get it. It just felt a bit false. But, and yeah, there were some good games featured, but my God, was it slow. It was so slow.
Yeah, it's not so much about the games, it's also about the presentation. Because
absolutely, yeah. And I think that's it. It's the presentation. We generally watch Nintendo Directs. Felix loves it so much, you described it as better than Christmas, didn't you?
I would actually go to say that, because Nintendo Directs are just one of my favorite things to watch. I literally, when you see that Twitter notification with a Direct announcement, the rest of the day is just fixed. It's just magic.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I love a Nintendo Direct as well. I just wish I had that level of enthusiasm over anything these days, and I wasn't just constantly tired. But it's good. But I do think that with Nintendo Directs, we've been utterly spoiled, because a Nintendo Direct comes out and it's like, hey, let's, here's one game, and then here's another, and another, and another, and another, and they can be, half an hour, 40 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes long, and they feature more games than we saw in the Summer Games Fest, which was, what was it? It was like an hour and 40 or an hour and 50 minutes long.
It was really long, I think.
It was really long, and I know it's a different way of presenting, and that's okay, but I really felt that there was something very odd about it, and I think what it comes down to is pacing. They went through a sort of a process of, they revealed a game, with a trailer and stuff, and then they would talk about it on stage with somebody relevant, for about 5 minutes or so, and it was honestly generally just sort of pleasantries like, thank you so much for being here, we're really excited about this game, we're doing some new stuff, whoa, that sounds exciting! For, God knows how many minutes, and then they moved on to another game and did the same thing, and then they would randomly just throw out like, oh, here's 5 games really quickly, and it's like, what? Slow down!
Yeah, I mean, I was asleep during this time, so I don't really know much.
But we filled you in, haven't we?
Yeah, I will say Goat Simulator 3, I love that it just skipped 2.
I had to double check, because I was like, yeah. I don't remember a Goat Simulator 2. That was
I think a lot of people were like that.
That was good. I enjoyed that.
It was also nice seeing the new Cuphead footage. This game looks fantastic. I'm really excited to play the DLC when it comes out. It's this month.
It is this month, yeah.
I'm so excited for that.
And that's the thing. The games themselves were good. I mean, there wasn't anything like super duper new, but they still put world premiere at the front of everything with that little jingle that really got under my skin for some reason. Maybe just because they played it too often. But the absolute, like, the pinnacle of what made this just this bizarre, like, fever dream experience was after, I don't even remember when it was. I thought it was like halfway through. I think it was like half an hour in. They randomly said, and now it's time for a special guest. And I thought, oh, someone's going to come out on stage. He's been in loads of games before. Who is it going to be? Dwayne The Rock Johnson. And I was like, okay. And it was just a random video he filmed in his gym, which contained not only product placement, he it was the one take. He tried to make a joke. It didn't really land, and he kept rolling with it, which, fair enough. I mean, I would have edited or just done a different take or something. But then, yeah, like random product placement for an energy drink. And then the whole thing was, hey, maybe
a magic rock?
Maybe it's a magic rock. Maybe. I don't know. That's not really what we're here to discuss, but I just found this instance so jarring, and it was really tough because I had no idea what to write when live blogging. I was like, I think in the end I just wrote, is The Rock okay?
Sweaty man in his gym talking about energy drinks and movies in a video game live stream.
It was so bizarre. I mean, they had some other ads as well. They even had a sizzle reel ad for Switch stuff. And, that was, that's fine. I've not got a problem with that. It just felt so out of place. And it felt so shoehorned. And again, I don't want to say for a moment that every presentation needs to be like a Nintendo Direct, but it really highlights how even a poor Nintendo Direct is just, the pacing is at least good. And that's something that I've taken on board when it comes to doing our indie spotlights. I've taken a lot of notes from Directs because I like them a lot, and I try to make them even faster paced than Directs because I don't want to waste people's time. I just don't get what was going on.
It's crazy to see how far behind Nintendo is at some aspect, but they have just nailed the presentation factor for games. I mean, PlayStation are getting there with their state of play, but it's nothing, in my opinion, compared to the Nintendo Directs.
Yeah, it's it just baffles me. Like, Jeff Keighley, his presentation was fine. It wasn't bad or anything. It was just
I was impressed,
slow.
like, how you can do that live, not mess up and stuff. Like, he was really good at just talking, but it is like doing a live thing. I mean, Nintendo went away from that. I mean, we saw instances of this at previous E3s with like Wii Music and stuff, and it just shows that live events can be very messy, where like if you can just plan things beforehand, it tends to be better. It's also why we don't do these live, so we can actually, like, if we mess up, we can just go back and make another take and stuff.
Or we can go back and take another take and stuff. Or we can go back and take another take and stuff.
Or we can go back and take another take or stuff.
I'm glad you jumped on that. But yeah, I agree. And, I think he stumbled over his words once or twice, I think. Perfectly fine. It's a live presentation. It's never easy to do those sort of things live. Which makes me wonder why they did it live. Like, there was no need. All the trailers and everything were pre-recorded. Like, all the conversations they had, they could have done a day in advance. They could have done a Jules Holland and pretended it was New Year's Eve. That's only going to be relevant for a very small fraction of our audience. But, there was no need to do this live. So I sort of feel that if they'd just done it like pre-recorded, it would have been a lot tighter and not as long, which is a big deal for me. And then they followed up with Day of the Devs afterwards, which I didn't watch all of, but I did like the Time Flies game. That was class.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like a broken record or anything, and I don't want to, it was fine as a presentation. It was fine. It was just, I think, well, maybe slightly below average. But the thing that kind of caught me off guard was the fact that it was, they revealed The Last of Us Part 1, the remaster, which I would argue maybe doesn't need to happen, but okay, whatever, I'm not here to critique that side of things. But they were just like, hey, here's The Last of Us Part 1. And they did this big thing about The Last of Us Part 1. Okay, they were talking to Troy Baker and stuff like that and all that sort of thing, showing stuff off. And then they were like, that's it, bye! Like, at least I sort of feel like maybe a bit of warning, like, hey, this is our last thing. Because I was sat there waiting for it to end and thinking, okay, am I going to have to type anything? I'm on an Xbox website. I'm not going to type about The Last of Us. And then it just kind of, and then it was just like, bye. A very, very specific, scenario that I imagine nobody else was in. But I did sort of feel like, oh, it's over.
It was a very abrupt end. I woke up like when they were talking about that, and I was hoping, oh, what's next? And then it just ended. I was like, okay. It ended with a thing I already knew, which was cool.
Admittedly, not their fault that people already knew. It was leaked and everything.
That's also like a big, like, that must have sucked. Like, you setting up this big thing and the last, like, announcement is leaked beforehand.
Yeah.
That's just a shame.
It is a shame, but is what it is. But, I mean, I know people have been saying that, hey, this is going to be the replacement for E3, and there are other presentations happening kind of as part of it, but this was meant to be, like, the big, like, opener? I don't know, it sort of felt like more like a sort of a developers conference or something, like an Apple developers conference, which is also famously dragged out and long. I don't know. What did you think?
I mean, I can't really give a lot of thoughts on it. But I would say that, again, we've just been spoiled. I mean, with every presentation, I'm like, well, this is cool, but Nintendo Direct. This is fine, but Nintendo Direct.
Yeah. I reckon if they cut the chaff and they just, sort of trim down some of the talking sections, or maybe even get rid of them entirely, because a lot of it was just, thanks so much for being here. Oh, thank you for having me. Which, pleasantries, fine, but it just took up too much of the time,
That can happen in private. We don't need to see that. That's just... I definitely agree that the thing should be shorter. I mean, something along the lines of 30, 40 minutes is much better for keeping our attention, especially when there isn't really that many interesting things to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fine if they were just packed with games, cool stuff for almost 2 hours, but this was just dragged out in such a way. It was a very meh presentation.
It was. I genuinely think they could have managed, if they cut it down and cut the chaff enough, I reckon you could have got the same amount of information through in, like, I don't know, like 30 minutes or maybe 40 minutes. Maybe, if we're being generous, 50 minutes. And I think that's being generous. And that's something that I think is definitely lacking. It's not concise at all. And that's something that I'm always super, super aware of when I can. Is trying to be as concise as possible, particularly when it comes to reviews and things like that. And I know I tend to waffle on videos like this, but this is a little bit different. It's more of a kind of a sort of a lay back, sit back. And even then, they're not as long as this presentation. I don't know. Maybe I'm being hypocritical. I don't know. Please let us know with a comment. Is Alex being hypocritical? I never said I wasn't a hypocrite, okay?
I will say that not only Nintendo does these things good, but Xbox and Microsoft tend to do these they are much more just like game all the time, and I feel like that's a much better approach. And I'm really excited to see. I know they're a part of this Summer Game Fest thing. I hope that they can bring something interesting to the table here in the coming days.
Me too. I think, in a way, having Microsoft and Bethesda having their own separate presentation, whilst, that's a fine concept, to then have this big, like, opening one, like the big, sort of official opening live stream. You know that they're going to be holding things back because Microsoft and Bethesda are going to want to save their announcements for their presentation.
Exactly. And if Nintendo are also planning on doing something themselves, I mean, everyone is just nowadays doing stuff themselves, like without E3 around, and they want to announce them themselves, of course. That makes the most sense. And with this presentation, I'm just really hoping for a Nintendo Direct here soon.
Me too.
I'm really high on copium. It's just, it's there.
I mean, when we were watching the presentation and there was like an ad section for Switch. They also did a separate Strikers one. That was that surprised me. But they'd had like just like, hey, look, it's the Nintendo Switch. It was essentially a Switch ad. My partner Sasha was watching it at the same time, and she was like, "Oh, is this a new Switch game?" And I was like, "No." I hadn't even seen like 3 seconds, and I was like, "No, it's not. Nintendo will be saving it for their own presentation."
Yeah.
But those are only our thoughts. What did you think of the Summer Game Fest? And I'm amazed I didn't call it Summer Games Fest, because that's what I always refer to it as, because it's more than one game, damn it!
True. I have no comment.
No comment, Felix. That's his new nickname. But yeah, let us know what your thoughts were in the comments down below. But for now, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then why don't you sit there and talk about it to someone and thank them a lot, and thank them for being there, and talk about the things that maybe have already been explained or would be more appropriately explained in a shorter, more concise format, maybe a trailer or just a quick overview, pre-recorded. And make sure you thank them for your time being. And by them, I mean that subscribe button. And be sure to check out NintendoLife.com for all sorts of lovely Nintendo-related content. Thank you again for watching. Bye-bye.
Imagine sitting there and talking to a subscribe button for almost 2 hours. That's
my life.